The silence in the command chamber of the dreadnought Eternal Wrath was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional chirp of incoming data streams. Commander Vexthara stood before the massive holographic display, her scarred carapace reflecting the cold blue light of distant stars. Her primary arms were crossed behind her back, while her secondary arms manipulated the tactical interface with practiced precision. For 300 years, she had been the apex predator of the galaxy's mercenary forces. Her reputation was built on victories against impossible odds, commanding fleets that had broken the backs of rebellions, crushed pirate armadas, and eliminated threats that entire planetary governments couldn't handle. The Zethkari Empire had hired her to end wars. The Trilaxian Confederation had paid her astronomical sums to make problems disappear. Even the mysterious Voidwalkers had once sought her services. But today, something was different. Today, she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing against her consciousness like a physical thing. "Report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been questioned. Lieutenant Korval, her intelligence officer, approached with visible reluctance. His normally pristine uniform showed signs of stress, wrinkled fabric, nervously adjusted insignia. "Commander, the situation in the Sol system continues to evolve." Vexthara's mandibles clicked in annoyance. In 3 centuries of service, her officers had never hesitated to give her information. The fact that Korval was choosing his words carefully sent a chill through her exoskeleton. "Elaborate," she said, turning her full attention to him. Her secondary eyes, designed for peripheral vision during combat, fixed on him with predatory intensity. Korval activated his personal display unit, and the main hologram shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of a small solar system. 8 planets orbited a yellow star, with the 3rd planet highlighted in pulsing red. Data streams flowed around it like digital rivers. The Devourers made contact with the human homeworld, Earth, approximately 6 standard months ago. Korval began. Initial projections suggested complete planetary consumption within 48 hours. Standard operating procedure for the Devourers when encountering a class 5 technological civilization. Vexthara nodded. She had seen the aftermath of Devourer attacks on dozens of worlds. The creatures were a plague that had swept across the galaxy for over 2 millennia, consuming everything in their path. They were biological weapons of unknown origin, capable of adapting to any defense, overwhelming any military force. Worlds that had stood against galactic empires for centuries fell to them within days. The humans were expected to follow the Kepler 438 scenario, Korval continued. Initial panic, followed by futile resistance, then complete biological assimilation within the predicted time frame. "And instead?" Vexthara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Instead, the humans are winning." The words hung in the air, like a physical presence. Vexthara felt her combat stimulants automatically trigger, flooding her system with chemicals that heightened her awareness and prepared her body for immediate action. It was an involuntary response to information that her mind classified as impossible. "Explain how a Class 5 civilization is defeating enemy that destroyed the hegemony of Kasdan," she said slowly. The hegemony had been a Class 1-2 civilization with technology that bordered on the godlike. They had controlled 47 star systems and possessed weapons capable of cracking planets. The Devourers had consumed their entire empire in less than a week. Korval's display shifted, showing tactical recordings from the early days of the conflict. Vexthara watched as primitive human vessels, barely capable of interplanetary travel, engaged Devourer bioships that dwarfed them by orders of magnitude. The expected outcome would have been instant annihilation. Instead, she watched the human ships adapt. The first engagement showed standard tactics, kinetic weapons, primitive energy cannons, nuclear devices. The Devourers absorbed the damage and responded with their typical overwhelming force. Human ships were destroyed by the dozens. It looked like every other first contact scenario she had witnessed. But then something changed. "Show me the engagement from day 15, she commanded. The hologram shifted, and Vexthara saw something that made her step backward involuntarily. The human ships were different. Where before they had been crude metal constructs following predictable tactical patterns, now they moved with organic fluidity. Their weapons had evolved, not upgraded, but evolved. Energy signatures that matched no known technology pulsed from their hulls. They started modifying their equipment using Devourer biomatter, Korval explained. Within 2 weeks of first contact, human engineers were reverse engineering alien biology and incorporating it into their own technology. Vexthara had seen species attempt this before. The results were always catastrophic. Devourer biology was designed to corrupt and consume any system it touched. Even advanced civilizations with sophisticated containment protocols had been overwhelmed when they tried to study captured specimens. "Show me their casualties," she said. The display revealed something even more disturbing. Human losses in the first week had been catastrophic, nearly 30% of their defensive fleet destroyed, but instead of retreating or negotiating, they had doubled their efforts. More ships appeared, each one incorporating lessons learned from the previous engagements. They were learning faster than the Devourers could adapt. "Commander," Corval said quietly, "we need to discuss the implications of Day 45. Vextara's stomach clenched. Day 45 was when everything had changed. She had received reports from her intelligence network that made no sense. Accounts that her analysts had initially dismissed as sensor errors or psychological breakdown among witnesses. The hologram showed a massive Devourer hive ship, a creature the size of a small moon with tentacles that could crack continental shelves. It was the kind of organism that single-handedly consumed entire civilizations. Surrounding it were human vessels that looked nothing like the ships they had started the war with. These weren't technological adaptations anymore. These were hybrid creatures, part machine and part something else entirely. They moved like living things, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and when they opened fire, their weapons seemed to scream through the vacuum of space. The humans didn't just reverse-engineer Devourer technology, Corval said. They improved it. They found weaknesses in billion-year-old biological systems and exploited them. They turned the Devourer's own evolutionary advantages against them. Big Stara watched as the human hybrid fleet surrounded the hive ship. The engagement lasted less than 7 minutes. When it was over, the hive ship was dead, and the humans were already beginning to harvest its remains. "How many hive ships have they destroyed?" she asked. 17 confirmed kills. The Devourer invasion force that consumed the Epsilon Eridani colonies has been completely eliminated. The creatures that overran the Tau Ceti defensive grid are within full retreat. Vextara felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries, professional jealousy mixed with genuine fear. The Devourers had been the galaxy's ultimate problem. Civilizations hired her to evacuate populations ahead of their arrival, not to fight them. No one fought the Devourers and won. "There's something else," Corval continued. "Long-range sensors have detected human ships moving beyond their solar system. They're not expanding randomly. They're hunting. They're tracking Devourer remnants across multiple star systems and eliminating them systematically." The implications hit Vextara like a physical blow. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They had gone on the offensive against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. They were actively hunting creatures that had devoured civilizations far more advanced than their own. "What are their intentions regarding other species?" she asked. Corval hesitated again. "Unknown. They've made no attempts to contact any galactic governments or mercenary organizations. They've shown no interest in territory claimed by other species. But, Commander, speak freely. Every intelligence analyst we've consulted reaches the same conclusion. The humans aren't just fighting the Devourers, they're becoming something new. Something that might be even more dangerous." Vextara stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. In her 3 centuries of warfare, she had developed an instinct for recognizing game-changing developments, the rise of new technologies, the emergence of tactical innovations, the birth of species-level threats. She had seen them all. But this was different. This felt like witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had encountered the ultimate predator and, instead of being consumed, had evolved into something that could hunt the hunters. "Set course for the Sol system," she commanded. Corval's expression showed alarm. "Commander, with respect, the Mercenary Guild's standing orders are to avoid human space until their intentions become clear. The risk—" "I didn't ask for your opinion of Guild policies," Vextara interrupted. "I'm going to observe these humans firsthand. If they represent a new kind of threat, I need to understand them. If they represent a new kind of opportunity—" She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. As the Eternal Wrath began its journey toward the Sol system, Vextara couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to witness something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The humans had proven they could fight monsters. The question that kept her awake during the ship's night cycle was simple. What happened when the monsters learned to fight back? She would soon discover that question itself was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what humanity had become. The war with the Devourers hadn't just changed human technology or tactics. It had awakened something in them that had been dormant since their species first learned to make tools and wage war. The Devourers had made a crucial error. They had given humanity an enemy worthy of its full attention. And when humans focused on something with complete dedication, reality itself seemed to bend around their will. Vexthara was about to learn that lesson firsthand. The journey to the Sol system took 12 days at maximum. Hyperspace velocity, 12 days during which Vexthara consumed every piece of available intelligence on humanity and their ongoing war against the Devourers. What she discovered challenged everything she thought she understood about warfare, evolution, and the nature of survival itself. The humans had appeared on the galactic stage only recently, having achieved interstellar travel less than 50 years ago. Their initial exploration beyond their solar system had been cautious, methodical, almost timid. They had established small research stations in nearby systems, made tentative contact with a few minor spacefaring species, and generally conducted themselves like any other emerging civilization, taking their first careful steps into the cosmic community. Nothing in their early behavior suggested they possessed the capacity for what they had accomplished against the Devourers. Lieutenant Corval had assembled a comprehensive database of pre-war human activities, and Vexthara spent hours studying their patterns. Their military technology had been primitive by galactic standards. Chemical rockets, crude energy weapons, basic defensive systems. Their largest warships were barely the size of her scout vessels. Their tactics followed conventional patterns that any competent military academy graduate could predict and counter. But their history told a different story. Commander, Corval said during one of their analysis sessions, I think we've been making a fundamental error in our assessment. Vexthara looked up from the tactical displays showing human ship movements over the past month. Explain. We've been analyzing the humans as if they were a typical emerging spacefaring civilization. But their homeworld data suggests something else entirely. The main hologram shifted to show Earth, rotating slowly to display its surface features. Continents and oceans passed by in gentle transition, looking deceptively peaceful. They've been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. Corval continued. Not occasional conflicts or territorial disputes. Constant, unending warfare spanning thousands of years. Their technological development has been driven almost entirely by military innovation. Vexthara studied the historical timeline that appeared alongside the planetary image. Wars were marked in red, and she realized with growing amazement that there was almost no period in human history without active conflict somewhere on their planet. They developed nuclear weapons within 75 years of achieving powered flight, Corval pointed out. Most species take centuries to reach that level of destructive capability. The humans were splitting atoms before they had reliable space travel. The implications were staggering. Most civilizations develop space travel as part of a natural progression from curiosity and exploration. They built their first starships to expand their territories, discover new resources, or escape overcrowded homeworlds. Warfare was typically a secondary consideration, something that happened when different species encountered each other and found themselves in competition. But humanity had weaponized everything from the beginning. They had turned scientific discovery into military advantage, with a speed and efficiency that spoke to something fundamental about their nature. Show me their industrial capacity, Vexthara commanded. The display shifted again, and she found herself looking at something that made her secondary heart skip a beat. In the 6 months since the Devourer invasion began, human industrial output had increased by over 400%. Not gradually. The increase had happened in explosive bursts, as if their entire civilization had shifted into a higher gear. They're not just building more ships, Corval explained. They're rebuilding their entire industrial infrastructure on a war footing. Every major population center has converted to military production. Every research facility is working on combat applications. They've turned their entire species into a military machine in less than half a year. Vexthara had seen civilizations attempt total mobilization before. It usually led to internal collapse as civilian populations rebelled against the economic strain and social disruption. Entire governments had fallen when they tried to sustain that level of military focus for more than a few months. But the humans were thriving under conditions that should have torn their society apart. Their casualty reports, she said suddenly. Show me the actual numbers. Corval's expression grew grim. The hologram displayed statistics that painted a picture of staggering loss of life. In the first month of fighting alone, over 50 million humans had died. Entire cities had been consumed by devourer bioorganisms. Massive stretches of their homeworld had been rendered uninhabitable. Any rational species would have sought surrender terms or evacuation assistance. Instead, human recruitment levels had skyrocketed. Civilians had volunteered for military service in numbers that exceeded their training facilities' capacity. They weren't fleeing from the war. They were demanding the right to join it. "Commander," Corval said quietly, "I think we need to consider the possibility that we're dealing with a warrior species that has been constrained by the lack of a worthy enemy." The thought sent a chill through Vexthara's combat-hardened mind. She had encountered warrior cultures before, species that glorified conflict and measured success through military achievement. But those civilizations typically burned themselves out through internal warfare or became so focused on combat that they neglected technological and social development. The humans seemed to have found a balance that allowed them to be both highly advanced and utterly savage. They had built a sophisticated civilization while maintaining the capacity for total warfare. It was like discovering a species of sophisticated philosophers who were also perfect predators. "Proximity alert," announced the ship's navigation officer, approaching the edge of human space. Vexthara moved to the command deck, her entire crew following in disciplined formation. The main viewing screen showed the familiar starfield of normal space, but she could feel tension radiating from every member of her crew. They were entering the territory of an unknown quantity, a species that had redefined what was possible in galactic warfare. "Passive sensors only," she commanded. "I want to observe before making contact." What they detected defied every expectation. The outer edge of the Sol system had been transformed into a fortress. Massive structures that appeared to be part machine, part organism orbited in carefully calculated patterns. Energy signatures pulsed through the construction like blood through arteries. Weapons platforms the size of asteroids hung in space, their surfaces covered with biomechanical growths that seemed to track their ship's movement despite the passive sensor approach. "Commander," whispered her sensor officer, "those defensive installations, they're alive. They're not just built with Devourer technology, they're evolved from it." Vexthara stared at the tactical display, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The humans hadn't just adapted Devourer biology for their weapons, they had created hybrid ecosystems, turning the aliens' own genetic material into defensive systems that served human purposes. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. "It's strange. The signal is using standard galactic protocols, but it's carrying multiple data streams that include biological components." "Audio only," Vexthara commanded. The voice that came through the speakers was human, but there was something else beneath it, harmonics that suggested the speaker wasn't entirely biological anymore. "Unknown vessel, you are entering human space. State your intentions and submit to biological scanning, or alter course immediately." Quote, Vexthara felt her crew's tension spike. Biological scanning was typically used to detect disease or genetic compatibility. Using it as a security measure suggested the humans had developed capabilities that went far beyond conventional threat assessment. "This is Commander Vexthara of the mercenary vessel Eternal Wrath," she responded. "I request permission to observe your operations against the Devourer threat. I represent no government or hostile organization." There was a pause that lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, long enough for multiple consultations or data analysis, but short enough to suggest highly efficient decision-making processes. "Permission granted. Commander Vexthara, you'll be escorted to observation coordinates near Jupiter's orbit. Any deviation from the prescribed flight path will result in immediate termination. Be advised that your vessel's defensive systems are insufficient to protect you from our security measures." The matter-of-fact delivery of the threat made it somehow more menacing. There was no bluster or intimidation in the human voice, just a simple statement of fact. They could destroy her ship, and they wanted her to understand that before proceeding. "Escort vessels approaching," reported her sensor officer. Vexthara looked at the main screen and felt her combat instincts scream warnings at her. The ships that emerged from the asteroid belt weren't ships in any conventional sense. They moved like living creatures, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Energy fields surrounded them that her senses couldn't properly classify. They seemed to exist somewhere between electromagnetic radiation and living tissue. "Those aren't human designs," she said aloud. "No, Commander," agreed Corval. "They're hybrid constructs. Human engineering using Devourer biology as a foundation. They've created something entirely new." The escort vessels took positions around the Eternal Wrath with movements that were both graceful and predatory. Vexthara realized that her ship was completely helpless if the humans decided to attack. Her weapons and defenses were designed to combat conventional technology. Against biomechanical hybrids that could adapt and evolve during combat, she would have no effective response. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in centuries, she was truly outmatched. As they traveled deeper into the Sol system, more evidence of human transformation became visible. Orbital platforms around Mars showed signs of massive expansion. The asteroid belt had been partially converted into manufacturing facilities that pulsed with organic energy. Even the space around Earth showed geometric patterns that suggested construction on a scale that rivaled galactic superpowers. "Commander," said her navigation officer, "I'm detecting gravitational anomalies around the inner planets. It's as if the humans have been manipulating stellar mechanics." Vexthara's mouth went dry. Stellar engineering was theoretical technology that even the most advanced civilizations had never successfully implemented. The energy requirements alone were beyond the capacity of most species, yet the sensor readings suggested the humans had somehow achieved practical applications in less than 6 months. "What have they become?" she whispered to herself. She was about to find out. As they approached Jupiter's orbit, the escort vessels transmitted final approach vectors. Waiting for them was a space station that defied easy classification. It was clearly of human origin, but it had been transformed by integration with alien biology until it resembled a living organism more than a mechanical construct. And she could sense intelligence within it. Not artificial intelligence, but something that felt like a hybrid of human consciousness and alien instinct. Something new that had never existed in the galaxy before. The humans hadn't just defeated the Devourers. They had transcended the limitations of their original biology and become something unprecedented. Vexthara was about to meet the next stage of human evolution, and she wasn't sure she was prepared for what she would discover. The space station, designated as Synthesis Prime, hung in Jupiter's gravitational shadow like a metallic flower that had learned to bloom in vacuum. Vexthara stared at it through the main viewport of her command deck, trying to understand what she was seeing. The structure was clearly artificial in origin, but it pulsed with organic rhythms. Tendrils of what appeared to be living metal extended from its central hub, each one terminating in complex arrays that her sensors couldn't properly classify. "Docking clearance granted," came the hybrid voice from the station's traffic control. "Base 7 is configured for your atmospheric requirements. Please note that biological integration protocols are in effect throughout the station." Vexthara's crew exchanged worried glances. Biological integration was typically a process that took months or years, involving careful genetic adaptation and surgical modification. The casual reference to it as a standard protocol suggested the humans had developed techniques that far exceeded conventional medical science. "Corval, you're with me," she commanded. "The rest of the crew maintains ready status. If we don't return within 6 hours, jump to coordinates Epsilon 7 and report our findings to Guild Command." The docking process felt different from any station she had previously visited. Instead of mechanical clamps and rigid connections, the docking bay seemed to flow around her ship, creating an organic seal that felt more like being swallowed than being birthed. Environmental readings showed that the atmosphere beyond the airlock was perfectly suited to her physiology, despite the fact that she hadn't provided specific biological data to the station. "They scanned us more thoroughly than we realized," Corval observed, checking his portable sensors. "The atmospheric composition is precise to within molecular tolerances. They know exactly what we need to survive." The airlock cycled with a sound that was part mechanical hiss and part organic exhale. When the inner door opened, Vexthara found herself looking into a corridor that challenged her understanding of space station design. The walls were not metal or polymer, but something that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured. Surfaces flowed in organic curves that suggested biological origin. Yet they incorporated technological elements seamlessly. Lighting came not from fixtures, but from bioluminescent patches that responded to their presence with gentle pulsing patterns. Walking through the corridor felt like moving through the circulatory system of some vast organism, one that had learned to incorporate mechanical elements into its biology rather than the other way around. "Commander Vexthara." The voice came from behind them, and both mercenaries spun around with weapons half drawn. Neither of them had heard anyone approach. The being that faced them was humanoid in basic structure, but had been modified in ways that defied easy categorization. The skin had a metallic sheen that suggested subdermal implants but moved with organic fluidity. Eyes that had once been human now showed geometric patterns that resembled circuit boards, yet they tracked with obvious intelligence and awareness. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Xenobiological Integration for this facility," the being said. "I apologize if my appearance is disturbing. The modifications are necessary for interfacing with our hybrid systems." Vexthara forced herself to relax. She had encountered heavily modified beings before, though never ones that seemed to have achieved such complete integration of biological and technological elements. "Dr. Chen," she said carefully, I request permission to observe your operations against the Devourer threat. My purpose is intelligence gathering for potential mercenary operations. Dr. Chen's modified features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. Your reputation precedes you, Commander. Your tactical analyses of the Kepler 438 and Epsilon Eridani engagements were quite insightful, though they were based on incomplete data. The casual reference to classified military intelligence sent a chill through Vexthara's combat systems. Her analyses had been delivered to specific clients under conditions of absolute secrecy. The fact that humans had access to them suggested surveillance capabilities that exceeded anything she had previously encountered. How did you, she began. We've been monitoring galactic military communications since the early days of the Devourer conflict, Dr. Chen interrupted. Your intelligence network is quite extensive, but it operates using conventional encryption that we found relatively simple to decrypt once we developed biological processing algorithms.
Corval made a choking sound.
The encryption systems used by the Mercenary Guild were considered unbreakable by any known technology. Military superpowers had spent decades trying to crack them without success. You're using Devourer neural patterns for code breaking? Vexthara asked. Among other applications, Dr. Chen confirmed. Would you like to see our operational center? I think it will give you a better understanding of how we've adapted to our current circumstances. They walked deeper into the station, passing through areas that became increasingly organic in appearance. Vexthara noticed that the bioluminescent patterns in the walls seemed to respond to Dr. Chen's presence, brightening as she approached and dimming after she passed. The station wasn't just using biological components. It was interacting with its human inhabitants as a living organism. The traditional approach to fighting the Devourers, Dr. Chen explained as they walked, involves trying to match their adaptive capabilities through technological advancement. Every species that has encountered them has attempted to build better weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. They passed a junction where several corridors met, and Vexthara saw other modified humans moving through the space. Each showed different levels of integration, from subtle enhancement to radical reconstruction. Yet they all moved with purpose and apparent comfort in their hybrid state. The problem with that approach, Dr. Chen continued, is that the Devourers have had millions of years to perfect their biological systems. Any technological solution we might develop they can adapt to and counter within hours. They entered a vast chamber that took Vexthara's breath away. The space extended beyond the range of her vision, filled with organic structures that pulsed with coordinated rhythms. Streams of data flowed through biomechanical conduits, like neural impulses through a vast brain. And throughout the space, modified humans worked in harmony with alien biological systems that had been repurposed for human objectives. So we took a different approach, Dr. Webb, Chen said. Instead of trying to out-evolve creatures that had perfected evolution, we chose to become something they had never encountered before. At the center of the chamber was a structure that defied classification. It was part computer, part organism, part something that had no name in any language Vexthara knew. Displays showed tactical information from across multiple star systems, but the data was presented in patterns that resembled living tissue more than conventional readouts. What am I looking at? Vexthara asked. The central coordination node for our hybrid collective, Dr. Chen explained. Every human who has undergone biological integration maintains a connection to this system. We share tactical awareness, strategic planning, even emotional states across our entire population. The implications hit Vexthara like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just adapted Devourer technology. They had created a hybrid consciousness that allowed their entire species to function as a single organism. It was like discovering that humanity had voluntarily transformed itself into something that combined individual intelligence with hive mind capabilities. How many of you are connected? She asked. Approximately 3 billion humans have completed basic integration, Dr. Chen replied. Another 2 billion are in various stages of the process. We estimate full species integration within 18 months. Vexthara felt her legs weaken. The humans were systematically transforming their entire population into hybrid beings that could interface directly with alien biology. It was the most radical species-level modification she had ever encountered. The advantages are considerable, Dr. Chen continued, apparently unaware of Vexthara's shock. Reaction times in combat are reduced to virtually instantaneous. Resource allocation happens at the speed of thought. Strategic planning incorporates input from billions of minds simultaneously. She gestured to one of the displays, which showed the current positions of human fleets across dozens of star systems. Ships moved in perfect coordination. executing complex maneuvers that would require months of planning using conventional command structures. But more importantly, Dr. Chen added, we can adapt to new threats faster than any enemy can develop countermeasures. When our forces encounter a new type of devourer organism, the entire species learns how to fight it within minutes. Vexthara watched as new tactical data flowed through the system. Somewhere in space, human forces had encountered a previously unknown devourer variant. Within seconds, analysis of its capabilities was distributed throughout the network. Countermeasures were developed, tested, and implemented faster than any individual mind could process the information. You've turned your entire species into a weapon system, she said. We've turned our species into something that can survive what's coming, Dr. Chen corrected. The Devourers were just the beginning, Commander. Our analysis suggests they're the advanced scouts for something much worse. The statement hit Vexthara like ice water in her veins. The Devourers had been considered the ultimate threat, creatures that represented the peak of destructive biological evolution. The idea that they might be merely the first wave of something even more dangerous was almost too terrifying to contemplate. What do you mean, advanced scouts? She asked. Dr. Chen's modified features showed expression that combined human emotion with something alien. Our integration with Devourer neural patterns has given us access to their genetic memories. They weren't created as weapons. They were created as a screening mechanism. Something is coming behind them, something that wanted to test the defensive capabilities of galactic civilizations before making its own appearance. The central coordination node pulsed with increased activity, and Vexthara realized that their conversation was being monitored and analyzed by billions of human minds simultaneously. She was not just speaking with Dr. Chen, she was addressing the entire hybrid collective. What is coming? She asked. We don't have complete information yet, Dr. Bees, Chen admitted. But the Devourer's genetic memory suggested something that views biological life as raw material for its own purposes, something that has been sleeping between galaxies and is now awakening. Vexthara felt the weight of cosmic horror settling on her consciousness. The galaxy had barely survived the Devourer invasion. The idea of facing something that used creatures like the Devourers as mere tools was beyond frightening. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Chen's hybrid features arranged themselves into something that might have been a smile, though it showed too many teeth and too much understanding. Because humanity isn't going to face this threat alone, she said. We're going to need allies. And those allies are going to need to be upgraded to survive what's coming. The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge across an abyss. Vexthara realized she was being invited to witness the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had transcended its original limitations and become something capable of fighting threats that exceeded conventional understanding. The question was whether she was ready to help humanity transform the galaxy, or whether she would choose to flee before the real war began. The war room aboard Synthesis Prime existed in a state of controlled chaos that challenged every tactical principle Vexthara had learned in 3 centuries of warfare. Information flowed through organic channels that pulsed with bioelectric energy, displaying data in patterns that seemed to shift based on the observer's focus. Modified humans moved through the space with fluid coordination, their enhanced consciousness allowing them to process multiple data streams simultaneously. Dr. Chen had granted Vexthara unprecedented access to their operational planning, and what she witnessed defied everything she thought she understood about military organization. Traditional command hierarchies had been replaced by something that resembled a neural network, where decisions emerged from collective analysis rather than top-down authority. Show her the Proxima engagement. Dr. Field, Chen said to the coordination node. The central display shifted, and Vexthara found herself looking at a 3-dimensional representation of a star system she didn't recognize. Ships moved through space in patterns that seemed almost choreographed, executing maneuvers that required perfect timing and coordination. This was recorded 18 hours ago, Dr. Pa, Chen explained. A Devourer hive cluster had established itself in the Proxima Centauri system and was using it as a staging area for attacks on nearby inhabited worlds. Vexthara watched as human hybrid vessels approached the enemy positions. The Devourer hive cluster was massive. Dozens of bioships that could individually consume planets, protected by swarms of smaller organisms that moved like schools of predatory fish through space. Standard tactical doctrine would call for a siege approach, she observed. Cut off their supply lines, wear down their defenses over months of careful attrition. Standard tactics assume you're fighting an enemy that thinks like you, Dr. Chen replied. The Devourers don't think. They evolve. Every moment you give them to adapt makes them stronger. The human fleet broke formation as it approached the hive cluster, individual ships spreading out in patterns that seemed random until Vexthahara realized they were following organic distribution models. Like antibodies responding to an infection, each ship found its optimal position based on real-time analysis of enemy behavior. "Watch this carefully, Dr. Retief," Chen said. "What you're about to see is impossible using conventional military doctrine." The human ships opened fire simultaneously, but their weapons weren't targeting the enemy vessels. Instead, they were firing into apparently empty space, creating energy fields that formed geometric patterns around the hive cluster. "They're not trying to destroy the enemy," Vexthara realized. "They're containing them." "The Devourer's greatest strength is their ability to adapt and evolve during combat," Dr. Chen explained. "But evolution requires environmental pressure. Remove that pressure, and they become vulnerable." The energy fields created by the human weapons began to interact with each other, forming a containment matrix that isolated the hive cluster from external stimuli, cut off from the cosmic radiation, gravitational fields, and electromagnetic signatures that drove their adaptive responses. The Devourer organisms began to show signs of confusion. "They're trying to evolve solutions to environmental challenges that no longer exist," Dr. Chen continued. "Their biological systems are consuming themselves trying to adapt to threats that have been artificially removed." Within minutes, the massive hive cluster began to collapse. Bioships that had survived attacks from entire fleets simply fell apart as their adaptive systems turned against them. The weapons that had made them invincible became self-destructive when they had nothing meaningful to adapt to. "Ingenious," Vexthara admitted. "But how did you develop this approach so quickly?" "This kind of tactical innovation should take decades of research and testing." "Took 17 minutes, Dr. Chen replied. "From initial contact with this hive cluster to implementation of the containment strategy. Every human connected to our network contributed to the solution development. Billions of minds working in parallel can solve problems that would take conventional military organizations years to address." The tactical display shifted to show the aftermath of the engagement. Human ships were already beginning salvage operations, harvesting useful biological material from the collapsed hive cluster. But more importantly, they were analyzing the enemy's adaptive responses to prevent similar organisms from developing countermeasures. "This is just one engagement," Dr. Chen said. "We're fighting on 47 different fronts simultaneously, each one providing data that improves our effectiveness across all theaters of operation."
Vexthara felt a chill of professional recognition.
She was witnessing the emergence of something that transcended conventional military doctrine. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were evolving their entire approach to warfare faster than their enemies could respond. "Lieutenant Corval," she said, turning to her aide. "Your assessment?" Corval had been silent throughout the demonstration, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. "Commander, I believe we're observing the birth of a galactic superpower. The humans have developed capabilities that exceed anything in our historical databases. More than that," Vexthara said slowly. "They've become something that makes the concept of galactic superpowers obsolete. Traditional military analysis assumes opponents with similar cognitive limitations. But if an entire species can think as one organism, then traditional military analysis becomes meaningless," Dr. Chen finished. "Which brings us to why we invited you here, Commander." The central coordination node pulsed with increased activity, and Vexthara realized that the entire conversation had been leading to this moment. She was being presented with something that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of her life and possibly the fate of the galaxy. "The intelligence you've gathered about our operations will be invaluable to galactic governments and military organizations." "Doctor," Chen said, "they'll want to know what humanity has become and what it means for the balance of power in the galaxy." Vexthara nodded. Her original mission had been to gather intelligence about human capabilities. What she had learned exceeded her wildest expectations and would certainly be of enormous value to her clients. "But that information will also accelerate the development of countermeasures against us," Dr. Chen continued. "Other species will begin developing technologies and tactics designed to neutralize our advantages. They'll view us as a threat to their independence and security." The implication was clear. By fulfilling her original mission, Vexthara would be contributing to the development of opposition to humanity's expansion. She would be helping to create the conditions for a galactic conflict that would dwarf the Devourer invasion. "What are you proposing?" she asked. "Join us, Doctor," Chen said simply. "Undergo biological integration and become part of our collective. Your tactical knowledge and experience would be invaluable in preparing for the real threat that's coming." The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge across an abyss. Vexthara realized she was being asked to abandon everything she had been. everything she had built over 3 centuries of warfare, and become something entirely new. What would happen to my crew, my ship, my organization? Your crew would be given the same choice you're being offered, Dr. Chen replied. Your ship would be upgraded with hybrid technology that would make it more capable than any vessel in the galaxy. As for your organization, she paused, and the coordination node pulsed with what felt like amusement. The mercenary guild will become obsolete within the year. When entire species can coordinate their military efforts at the speed of thought, the concept of professional military contractors becomes meaningless. Vexthara felt the weight of cosmic change pressing against her consciousness. She was witnessing the end of an era and being offered a place in whatever came next. The galaxy she had known, the systems of power and conflict that had defined her existence, were about to be swept away by forces that operated on principles she was only beginning to understand. I need time to consider, she said. Of course, Doctor, Chen replied. But while you're considering, there's something else you need to see. The central display shifted again, showing long-range sensor data from the galaxy's edge. At first, Vexthara saw nothing unusual, just the normal cosmic background radiation and distant stellar formations that marked the boundary between their galaxy and the void beyond. Then she noticed the distortions. Space itself seemed to be bending in subtle patterns that suggested the presence of massive gravitational anomalies. But these weren't natural phenomena. They showed geometric regularity that indicated artificial origin. What am I looking at? She asked. The preliminary signs of arrival, Dr. Chen replied. Whatever created the Devourers is beginning to manifest at the edge of our galaxy. Our analysis suggests it will achieve full materialization within 2 years. The scale of the approaching threat began to dawn on Vexthara. The distortions covered light years of space, suggesting something whose physical presence dwarfed entire star systems. If this was what the Devourers had been created to herald, then everything she thought she understood about cosmic threats was pathetically inadequate. How do you know this is hostile? She asked. Because we've been analyzing the Devourers' genetic memories, Dr. Chen replied. Their creators don't view biological life as worthy of consideration. They see organic matter as raw material to be harvested and repurposed. The Devourers were sent ahead to eliminate any civilizations capable of meaningful resistance. Vexthara stared at the sensor data, her mind struggling to process the implications. The Devourers hadn't been an invasion, they had been a test. The galaxy had been measured and found wanting, cleared of obstacles for whatever was coming behind them. Except humanity had refused to be cleared away. The Devourers were supposed to report back that galactic civilizations posed no significant threat, Dr. Chen continued. Instead, they've gone silent. Their creators will investigate. And when they arrive, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Vexthara could imagine what would happen when beings capable of creating the Devourers discovered that their advanced scouts had been systematically destroyed by what they considered primitive biological organisms. You're not just preparing to defend the galaxy, she realized. You're preparing to take the fight to them. Dr. Chen's hybrid features arranged themselves into an expression that combined human determination with something that had learned to be predatory. Humanity has never been good at fighting defensive wars, she said. We're much better at hunting. In that moment, Vexthara understood what she was really being offered. Not just membership in a new kind of collective, but participation in something that would determine whether biological life had a future in the universe. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were preparing to wage war against forces that viewed the destruction of entire galaxies as routine resource gathering. And they were asking her to help them do it. The choice before her was simple: remain as she was, and watch the galaxy be harvested by incomprehensible entities, or become something new, and help humanity turn the tables on predators that had never encountered prey capable of fighting back. As she stared at the sensor readings showing the approach of cosmic horror, Vexthara made her decision. 6 months after her integration into the human collective, Vexthara stood in the command chamber of what had once been her ship, the Eternal Wrath. The vessel bore little resemblance to its original configuration. Biomechanical modifications had transformed it into something that existed at the intersection of advanced technology and living organism. Organic conduits pulsed with neural energy, connecting her enhanced consciousness directly to every system aboard the ship. But it was no longer just her ship. Lieutenant Corval and the rest of her crew had undergone the same integration process, their individual minds now part of the vast network of human consciousness that spanned multiple star systems. The distinction between self and collective had become fluid, allowing her to maintain her individual identity while sharing in the combined knowledge and capability of billions of minds. The transformation had been more radical than she had imagined. The integration process involved more than technological enhancement, it required a fundamental reconstruction of consciousness itself. Her original thoughts and memories remained intact, but they were now embedded within a cognitive framework that operated on principles she was still learning to understand. Through the collective network, she could sense the preparations taking place across the galaxy. Entire solar systems had been converted into manufacturing facilities for hybrid technology. Civilian populations of a dozen species had volunteered for integration, their home governments choosing cooperation over resistance when faced with the approaching cosmic threat. Even the proud Zethkari Empire had requested assistance in preparing their fleets for what was coming. Fleet status report, she thought, and immediately received updates from every vessel under her command. Where once she had controlled a single mercenary crew, she now directed a battle group of 57 hybrid ships, each one crewed by beings who had chosen to transcend their original biological limitations. The approaching enemy had been designated the architects by human intelligence analysis. Long-range sensors now showed massive structures materializing at the galaxy's edge, constructs that dwarfed planets and suggested engineering capabilities that operated on cosmic scales. Preliminary analysis indicated they were building something, though its purpose remained unclear. Commander Vextara came the communication through the collective network. It was Dr. Chen, though her individual identity was now embedded within the larger hybrid consciousness. The architects have begun active scanning of our galaxy. We estimate first contact within 72 hours. Through the network, Vextara accessed tactical displays showing the enemy's approach. The architects moved through space using methods that defied conventional physics, manipulating gravitational fields and spatial geometry to travel faster than light without using hyperspace. Their ships, if they could be called ships, were geometric forms that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. "What's our force disposition?" she asked. Data flowed through the network faster than individual thought could process. Human hybrid fleets were positioned throughout the galaxy, using tactics that abandoned traditional concepts of front lines and defensive positions. Instead, they had created a dynamic network of mobile forces that could respond to threats anywhere in the galaxy within minutes. But more importantly, they had allies. The Trilaxian Confederation had provided their quantum manipulation technology, allowing human engineers to develop weapons that could affect targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The hegemony of Casthen had contributed survivors of the Devourer attacks, beings whose experience with cosmic horror had prepared them for what was coming. Even species that had never achieved interstellar travel had been integrated into the network, their unique biological capabilities adding new possibilities to the collective. "The galaxy is more unified than it has been in recorded history," Dr. Chen continued. "But unity alone won't be enough. The architects possess capabilities that exceed anything we've previously encountered." Through captured Devourer genetic memories, the collective had learned fragments of information about their creators. The architects were ancient beyond comprehension, entities that had consumed entire galaxies across cosmic history. They viewed biological life as an inefficient use of matter and energy, preferring to convert organic material into more useful configurations. The Devourers had been their standard approach to clearing inhabited systems, biological weapons designed to eliminate resistance while preserving raw materials for harvest. But the unexpected destruction of the Devourer fleets had triggered a different response. The architects were coming in person to investigate. "First contact protocols are in effect, Doctor," Chen transmitted. "Remember, our primary objective is intelligence gathering. We need to understand their capabilities before committing to full engagement." Vextara felt the collective consciousness focusing its attention on the galaxy's edge, billions of minds turning towards sensors that were detecting the first signs of direct architect intervention. Reality itself seemed to be shifting as massive constructs entered normal space, their presence causing gravitational distortions that affected stellar mechanics across multiple star systems. "They're not just entering our space," she realized. "They're rewriting the physics of local space-time to match their requirements." The implications were staggering. The architects possessed technology that could alter fundamental forces within entire regions of space, creating environments where their capabilities functioned optimally, while potentially disrupting technologies that depended on standard physical laws. "All units prepare for physics variance," she transmitted to her battle group. "Weapon systems may experience performance fluctuations as local spacetime is modified." Through the collective network, she sensed similar preparations taking place throughout human space. Ships that had been designed using hybrid technology were already adapting to the changing conditions, their biomechanical systems evolving countermeasures to maintain functionality in altered space. The first direct communication from the architects came as a broadcast across all electromagnetic frequencies simultaneously. It wasn't transmitted in any recognizable language, but the collective network's analysis capabilities decoded its meaning within microseconds. Biological entities of galactic designation N87. Your resistance to clearing protocols has been noted. Prepare for direct evaluation. Compliance will be rewarded with efficient processing. Resistance will result in extended disassembly procedures. The message carried implications that chilled even the enhanced consciousness of the collective. The architects weren't offering negotiation or surrender terms. They were announcing their intention to process the galaxy's biological life as they would any other resource. The only choice was between quick death and slow death. Response protocols activated. Dr. Chen transmitted. All fleets advanced to engagement positions. Vexthara felt her battle group accelerating toward the galaxy's edge, their hybrid drives allowing them to traverse interstellar distances in hours rather than days. Around her, she sensed thousands of other groups moving into position, creating a three-dimensional network of forces that surrounded the approaching architect constructs. But as they drew closer to the enemy positions, the true scale of what they faced became apparent. The lead architect construct was larger than most star systems, a geometric form that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Smaller constructs, each one the size of a moon, moved around it in patterns that suggested both escort formations and construction activities. Analysis complete. Came a transmission from the Collective Science Division. The main construct appears to be a mobile processing facility. The smaller constructs are specialized tools for planetary disassembly and matter conversion. Through enhanced sensors, Vexthara could see the architect's intentions with terrifying clarity. They weren't planning to conquer the galaxy. They were planning to deconstruct it on the molecular level and rebuild it according to their own requirements. Every planet, every star, every living being would be reduced to component materials and repurposed. Engagement range in 30 seconds, she transmitted to her battle group. But as they approached weapons range, something unexpected happened. The architect constructs stopped moving and began broadcasting a different type of signal, one that the collective network recognized as a scanning beam designed to analyze their targets in detail. The results of that scan would determine whether the galaxy lived or died. Through the collective network, Vexthara sensed the architects' surprise as they encountered beings that didn't match their previous analysis. The humans and their allies weren't just biological entities anymore. They were hybrid organisms that combined organic intelligence with technological capabilities that the architects had never encountered. They're recalculating, Dr. Chen transmitted. We represent something outside their predictive models. For the first time in cosmic history, the architects had encountered a galaxy that had refused to remain static. Instead of waiting to be harvested, the biological entities had evolved beyond their original limitations and become something unprecedented. The response came as a focused transmission directed specifically at the human collective. Analysis indicates anomalous development in local biological entities. Standard processing protocols inadequate. Implementing enhanced evaluation procedures. More constructs began materializing from the void, each one larger and more complex than those that had come before. The architects were escalating their approach, bringing capabilities that had been reserved for threats far more advanced than anything they expected to find in this galaxy. But they had made a fundamental error in their assessment. They were still thinking in terms of conflicts between civilizations, assuming they faced advanced technology operated by biological minds that functioned within conventional limitations. They had failed to recognize that they were about to face something that had never existed before. An entire galaxy that could think, plan, and act as a single organism, while maintaining the creativity and unpredictability that came from billions of individual consciousnesses working in harmony. All units, Vexthara, transmitted, her enhanced consciousness reaching across light years to coordinate with forces she could barely have imagined commanding in her original form. Implement dispersal pattern Omega. The real war is about to begin. As hybrid ships spread throughout local space and weapon systems that defied conventional physics powered up for the first engagement, Vexthara felt something she had never experienced in 3 centuries of warfare. Complete confidence in victory against impossible odds. The architects had created the Devourers to eliminate resistance before beginning their harvest, but in doing so, they had given humanity and its allies something they had never possessed before, a common enemy that required them to transcend every limitation that had previously defined them. The galaxy that emerged from that transformation was something the architects had never encountered in their cosmic wanderings. They were about to discover what happened when predators tried to hunt prey that had learned to be more dangerous than they were. The first shots of a war that would determine the fate of biological life in the universe were about to be fired. And for the first time since the architects had begun their harvest across cosmic history, they were going to face opponents who understood that the best defense was an overwhelming offense. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.